Welcome to Connections, the Media Edition, a production of the Downtown Rotary Club of Milwaukee and the Milwaukee Press Club, where we explore how local journalists and the companies they work for are navigating the many challenges and opportunities they face in this new media landscape and the impact the changes are having on our community. And now to our hosts, Tom Lujack and Meredith Meyer.
Welcome to the first edition of Connections, the Media Edition. I'm Meredith Meyer.
And I'm Tom Lujack. Meredith and I will be co-hosting the podcast that gives you the inside story on how journalists and other media professionals create the news stories about life in our community.
Today, our focus is on how two local media organizations are covering neighborhood news. Our guests are Kanala Phillips, editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel's newly created Neighborhood Dispatch team, and Ron Smith, the executive director of the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service, which covers 18 different neighborhoods in Milwaukee's Central City. Welcome, Kanala and Ron.
Hi.
Ron, I want to begin the discussion with you. So the Neighborhood News Service has been around since 2011. How did it get started?
Well, the Neighborhood News Service got started because other outlets were not covering our communities of color and providing a complete portrait of them. So a lot of times newsrooms were coming in for doom and gloom and drama and trauma. And so the Neighborhood News Service was created to kind of offset those stereotypes and to provide professional journalism for free that was accessible to communities of color that had been ignored or misrepresented. And for 15 years, we've been doing it. We've actually gone beyond covering, I would say, 18 neighborhoods to covering issues of concern to Black and Brown Milwaukee residents.
And you're based right here?
And we're housed right here in a terrific Diedrich College Communication, which has opened its doors for about 12 years. I think we've been here, and we're grateful to have that space. We get to work with wonderful students, but we have a professional staff of 10 journalists and editors who help us tell the stories that we love to tell.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Kanala, the Journal-Sentinel has been an institution here in Milwaukee for decades and decades, covering state, national, and international news, and of course, local news. So why did it create the Neighborhood Dispatch team, and what exactly are you focusing on?
Awesome. So the Journal-Sentinel, like you said, it's a major institution, and I always say this when I talk about the Neighborhood Dispatch. Nothing we do is entirely brand new. And so not only have we been in a city that has had institutions like Neighborhood News Service, but the Journal-Sentinel has also done very local work. And I think leadership decided, hey, we're noticing we're not covering certain areas of the city nearly as closely as we would like, and recognizing that most outlets can't cover it all, that if you want to broadly cover a topic, you might miss an opportunity to cover something in a specific neighborhood. And so the thought was, let's create a team. Let's decide on a couple or few neighborhoods to start with. Let's assign a reporter and kind of embed them in that neighborhood, allow them to be generalists and experts in that neighborhood, or at least, attempt to be, try to be, and see how that helps us improve not only our coverage of that area, but our relationships with people in those spaces, and really commit ourselves to, when we say we want to serve the city and we want to serve folks with timely, accurate, and representative news media, to really put that to the test on a even more specific scale. So that's some of the thoughts that leadership was having when they decided to launch the program. And I came on last June, so June 2025, to start that journey, and it's been a pleasure so far.
Is your focus on people of color, just as Ron described his services?
So our focus is 3 neighborhoods in Milwaukee. We're in Harambe, Layton Boulevard West, and Metcalf Park. And so all 3 of those neighborhoods are predominantly people of color. we don't exclusively say that we are only serving people from particular ethnic backgrounds, but more so we're serving those neighborhoods. We're producing news with care, and we are focusing on stories that elevate solutions and efforts to dismantle systems that hold back progress. So a lot of times we find ourselves doing stories on folks of color, and we're working on opportunities to strengthen our relationships with folks who maybe feel like they haven't been traditionally covered well by the news media. So it's all intersecting quite a bit there.
How large are both of your teams, your staffs? Ron, we can start with you.
So we've actually have grown a lot over the 15 years thanks to Milwaukee's philanthropic community and residents. And so we've gone from 6 part-time reporters and editors to 10 full-time reporters and editors.
Yeah.
And we're embarking on a $3 million campaign to raise more money to enlarge our newsroom so that we can continue to serve and super serve those communities that have been ignored, and also to provide a platform for residents to get their voices heard, a center for community engagement, looking at ways to train residents to become their own journalists in a way so that they understand how to file a public records request. Mm-hmm. So how they understand how to submit a press release so that it becomes a two-way relationship instead of one way.
Okay. Some of the growth in staffing, did some of that have to do with the merger with Wisconsin Watch back in 2024? I know that happened, and did that help infuse some growth there?
Well, we've had a relationship with Wisconsin Watch from the beginning. So when I came here 7 years ago, we started really seriously thinking about how we could complete and not compete. In other words, not going to the same funders, but going together to make asks. So one of the first things that happened was probably in May of 2019, Andy Hall, the co-founder of Wisconsin Watch, called me and says, "Hey, Ron, we should apply for this grant from Google, this Google Innovation Grant." And he said, "We're not going to get it, but we should apply." So we worked all Memorial Day, 3 days. I mean, we were up all night, and we got a $300,000 grant from Google, one of 25 newsrooms in North America, to do it. And we've created what we call News 414, which is our text-based messaging service that we can text residents and residents can text us, and we have a way to ask questions and get questions answered, part of providing solutions. So that was the first step. And then around that time, the American Journalism Project was forming. They are venture philanthropists who've invested, I think, close to $1 billion in local newsrooms. And they asked me, they said, "Do you know Wisconsin Watch?" And I said, "Sure." And they asked, "Wisconsin Watch, do you know Neighborhood News Service?" We said, "Sure." So they asked us to apply for a grant together. So we actually applied for a grant together. We were the first and only, actually, newsrooms that have shared a grant through American Journalism Project. And what that did was allow us to increase our business capacity. So both newsrooms have been in the journalism business for quite a while. We're 15 years old. Wisconsin Watch is, I think, 18 years old. But we were not in necessarily the business of journalism. And what I mean by that is looking at audience, looking at memberships, really finding businesses that business efforts that sustain your growth. And so with that model, we hired 3 people who worked for Wisconsin Watch in the business department, but they had to work for NNS as well. And then NNS, we got our first development manager, and then we got a community engagement director. We never really thought we were going to merge because we had a good relationship, but that opportunity made a lot of sense as we looked at Marquette had been a great and is a great partner, for Marquette's an educational institution. So to be in a space that is nonprofit is completely different, and the priorities have to be different. And Marquette gives us free housing, so I'm never going to be that 18-year-old kid who says, "Mommy and Daddy don't give me allowance." I am so grateful for Marquette. But this gave us a chance. We were all growing Marquette, and that's a blessing that we were in a time where other outlets were shrinking, we were growing. And so now we are together, but the newsrooms are editorially independent. So all decisions in Milwaukee are made in Milwaukee. But what happens is that we can work together. So as we talk about, for example, looking at the flooding resources. Wisconsin Watch is looking at how that happened. And that would have never happened without the merger. Our stories now get transmitted through their website as well. So now we're reaching state legislators and things like that. On the other hand, Wisconsin Watch is getting a Milwaukee presence that they didn't have. And a lot of stories that they write have actually, when it gets on NNS site, has outperformed on NNS site. So I think they learned that, wow, we have a loyal audience, and we are learning things like when the Social Development Commission abruptly closed, we had a meeting between the two newsrooms. And Wisconsin Watch was like, we got to find out why it happened. And we got to, dig into all that. And Princess, who's a Marquette grad and one of our oldest reporters, she's been here for 6 years, she said, that is great, but we need to tell people right now that it closed, what that means, and what the services are. So now we're working together in a way that super serves Milwaukee, the rest of Wisconsin. So our mission is really to inform, inspire, and connect residents. And the merger has allowed us to do that. And also, when people think mergers, sometimes they think, oh, did someone get fired? Someone, layoffs, things like that. Our merger really was 1 + 1 = 3. Our newsroom, which had been really reliant on grant funding, was way underpaid. So everyone got a raise, and everyone came. Everyone from the newsroom is still here, and they came and to the newly formed NNS, and I call it NNS Next, which is kind of given us a chance to not only hire people who are fresh out of college, which is great. We want that. But we also want to be a destination for other people who are veterans. And so now, we had a national search for managing editor. And guess what? It was a local man, Edgar Mendez, who's been with NNS since its beginning, who became our managing editor. But that was a national search. And Edgar kind of stepped up, and we're like, Edgar, you can do this, so do it. And so that helps to have a person who was born on the South Side, who understands Milwaukee, who understands the issues, who understands what NNS does, what it means to people, and can keep that going. NNS has a mission. That mission is to really serve. So everything about NNS is in its name. It's Milwaukee, it's neighborhoods, it's news, but most importantly, it is service. We see journalism as a service that provides civic education and information that spurs critical conversations.
It's all really, really important context. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And maybe we could go back to some of that, the collaborative nature of what NNS does later. Kanala, tell me a little bit about your team. How many people on staff?
So our team is much younger. We like I said, we just got started last year in 2025. We have, in addition to me, there are 4 other people on the team. So we have 3 folks who are traditional reporters in each neighborhood. So 1 Harambe reporter, that's Everett Eaton. And then we have our Layton Boulevard West reporter, who is Alyssa Salcido. In Metcalf Park, we have April Cavedo. And then we have 1 photojournalist on the team, and that's Angelica Edwards. And so it's 5 of us in total. We are a pilot project that is embedded in a larger newsroom, obviously. So there are some limitations to the kinds of stories that we do, only because there are other folks who have similar beats, sometimes that push up against the work that we do. And so we are pretty confined to our neighborhoods, always looking for opportunities to do larger projects and investigations. It's a really ambitious team, and so they've really dug into all sorts of topics, but we've also been able to tell more personal stories about individual folks. I think Ron mentioned earlier, just like telling success stories. And so we've also been given the opportunity where newsrooms can be so fast paced that you don't get the opportunity to tell the story about how someone saved a life, in an intersection in Metcalf Park, or how a woman started a cleanup crew and it's been going on for however many years. And so we're able to tell some of these really specific stories that really land well with the folks that we're trying to serve. One of my favorites is a profile about a woman who decorates her house differently for every single holiday, and everyone knows her. And so, those have been some awesome opportunities, but we've also been able to dig into larger stories about housing complexes that maybe aren't treating their tenants right. We've been looking into the grocery stores across the city, particularly starting in Metcalf Park, and then kind of following that issue as it expands throughout the city, and as residents in that neighborhood continue to galvanize other folks to participate in looking for solutions. And then one of my favorite elements of this team, or the pilot, I think when I was brought on, is, they said we want to do this news, but we also want to find ways to really engage folks. We want to form a team that is big on participatory media. We want to find ways for folks to be embedded in the neighborhood, not just as a newsmaker, but as a community member. And I think that's something that I work on with the team, is like, how can we be the best community members possible? Like, full stop. What does that mean? And what does that look like? And so our team also does some other things. For example, each member of the team volunteers in their respective neighborhood.
Okay.
And that was something, I think everyone was like, what? And I was like, no, it sounds crazy, but
That
I
was
mean,
your idea, right?
yeah.
For volunteering? Yeah, I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, people were like, Kunal, are you sure? And I was like, I mean, think about it though. You want folks to trust you. You want folks to, I mean, at some point, if you're looking at this work in the model that we currently exist in, this is not exactly it. But when we're talking about, our traditional audience, we're trying to get folks who, even at one point, not only do you enjoy consuming it, but you would put money down for it, right? Like, you'd pay for it. And so I think if that's like in the air, this idea that journalism is not only important because it keeps us informed, but we live in an industry, or we work in an industry where it is so important, we need to make sure that it's sustainable, that it pays for itself. What does that mean? It means you build in trust in a real way. And I think that means showing up for people. Like, before you talk money, like, what does it just mean to show up for folks? Like, you want someone to talk to you, you want them to tell them your story, then pick up a box when you see them, trying to stock a food pantry. You know what I mean? Show up for the events, not because you need to cover it, but because you just want to get to know folks, because you want to be a part of the community. And so that's been an initiative that has helped us, I think, understand the city better, understand folks better. And a lot of the insights are pretty nuanced, honestly. It's a small thing, noticing how this community member interacts with another, understanding how an organization is, maybe struggling to provide the services they provide, or maybe that understanding how many people it takes for an organization to do the things that they do. So there are times where those insights are nuanced, but I have watched my reporters feel more confident in their reporting, even if the story is completely unrelated to their volunteering. Mm-hmm. They're confident in what it takes to understand the space, what it takes to meet someone where they're at. And then we tried to take that the step further because, like I said, we're new kids on the block. We now all of us are Milwaukee natives, and again, nothing we have done has not been done before. Mm-hmm. We have giants to look up to, and I'm sitting right next to one. And so we also said, okay, we need to be in the community in a more organized way. So we just finished a listening session, like kind of sprint, and we called it Community Meals and Conversations. And so it was pretty obvious, pretty straightforward, but it just gave us the opportunity to, one, fellowship. That's my favorite thing. Fellowship with folks, share space, break bread, let the conversation flow quite organically, hear some feedback on how reporting has impact folks, or stories that they maybe like, stories that they didn't get a chance to see, or stories they would like to see. But there have been a lot of times where the banter of the space honestly just came an opportunity for neighbors to talk to each other. We had one session on the south side where folks were like, I got this notification on my door about someone trying to, buy my house. And I know this is a perennial issue around the city, but it became a space for all the neighbors to be like, wait, I got that too. Who do you think, put it there? I'd love you guys to look into it. But also them talking to themselves about how they felt about it and how frustrated they were, and group chats they have amongst themselves that other people can get involved in. It just came a forum that we help maybe facilitate, and maybe we get to write stories about it. But even if the journalism stops there, it's an opportunity to create space. I think we did something that was really powerful, and even folks just raising their hand. Hey, I got this cool thing going on. It'd be cool if you guys at the JS covered it, but I just want to let everybody else here know. So that's our program so far. We have a lot of big goals as far as what we want to continue doing, and we always have to make sure that we're working collaboratively with other reporters in the newsroom, because like I said, it's this pilot program that's embedded in this really large, institution. But we've been given the opportunity to really try things that are new. And when neighbors come to us, which at this point they do, and they say, yeah, what you're doing, I can see it's news. You also seem kind of like community folks. I have this idea. Can you do it? And a lot of times we get to do it. Neighbors came to us and they said, what if we took a newsletter and we went door to door in Metcalf Park? Okay, let's try it. And now we're on our 4th month of producing said newsletter. Or, hey, what does it mean to partner with the news organization on a cleanup? Like I said, these things have been done. We're not doing anything new, but it's also fun when we can have folks who decide, I could partner with anybody on these things, and I've seen you guys produce these stories. I'm seeing myself represented, and what does it mean to continue to partner with you, continue to be in community with you, and continue to find creative ways to keep our folks informed? And so that's what we've been up to.
So you both have done a great job describing how you go about covering the neighborhoods that you're in. Who's reading your stories? Have you done any research? Do you know who's out there consuming this great information that you're gathering?
So I think that's always a good question, and it could be asked at the Washington Post, the New York Times, and other places too. But I wanted to, and I'll get to that answer, but I want to follow up with what you were saying. I think that for a long time, journalism has been based on conflict, right? So if dog bites man, it's not a story, but if man bites dog, it's a story. And we're trying to rewrite that tired narrative, because we all love, trust, and love are action words, and we have to demonstrate that to our readers. And at NNS, we have community ambassadors that go out into the community, and they're listening, and they're bringing back stories, but not always. They're going out and they're saying, hey, people are complaining about parking tickets, or people are talking about this woman who bakes 100 cookies. And so we go out and try not to be transactional, but to be transformational. In terms of who reads us, people are always surprised that I think for NNS, we can measure metrics in terms of newsletter subscriptions, because we are free. MilwaukeeNNS.org. You can always donate. You can always subscribe to our newsletters. I got to put that in there. Yes. But we have 9,000 email subscribers, and when you look at who's on that list, they're not necessarily in the neighborhoods that we serve. Those are people who want to learn about those neighbors. Those are heavy hitters. Those are media workers. And so then we go and look at Facebook. And we have, I think, 25,000 followers on Facebook. But that doesn't tell the whole story. We're growing. We're trying to learn our audience. We have, I don't think we can say what the audience is, but I think for me, NNS needs to become more in your face. We've been around for 15 years, but we're not a household name. And I'm reminded that every time I go to my family in Milwaukee, I have an aunt who lives on the north side, and she will say, hey, Ron, did you see this story? And we wrote it. I know Urban Milwaukee has the logo, but they don't.
You got to spend more time with your aunt.
I have. And she donates every year, and she says, he works at Marquette, I don't, and doesn't know what I do. But we have to be more strategic, which means that we're hiring an audience person, right? I think when I talked before that we were in the journalism business for 15 years, but we're not always in the business of journalism. Yeah. Writing a story is not the only way. Yeah. It's not the only measure. You got to get the story to the people where they want it, when they want it, and the place where they want it. Whether it's TikTok, whether it's a video, whether it's audio. In Milwaukee County, a third of Milwaukee County residents have a 3rd grade reading comprehension level or below. So even the great work that we're doing, people can't read. So we have to figure out ways to reach those people as well. So our audience is actually more diverse than people think it is. I think we're well known by the Block Club presidents and the leaders, but if my cousin Ramon doesn't know who we are, and he donates. I make him donate $25 a year, and he doesn't know what he's donating. So that's a persistent challenge, not just for NNS, but for everybody. There are people who don't know that the JS is still around. And I don't mean that as shade, because I worked 14 years at the Journal Sentinel and appreciate that. When the Neighborhood Dispatch team was starting, people kept saying, oh my God, what is NNS going to do? And I said, well, we've always been doing. covering the news the way we have always done it. I always tell people that I want to be on the A team and the B team. The A team is working with top-rate professionals who are doing great stuff. The B team is I'm going to be there when the A team is gone. And we are committed to Milwaukee, and Milwaukee has been committed to us. In terms of the nonprofit sphere, there's a lot of newsrooms that are starting up now that have been funded by by philanthropy. Milwaukee was one of the first 15 years ago. Zilber Family Foundation, Greater Milwaukee Foundation, Bader invested in NNS when community-oriented newsrooms such as ours was really not in vogue. It's in vogue now, but it wasn't always. And I think Milwaukee, sometimes we get this inferiority complex, and sometimes we're always at the top of every worst list that can be. But in terms of giving to the community and supporting it, Milwaukee has always been there. So our audience continues to grow.
Yeah, so Canella, you work for a for-profit company, part of Gannett, Journal-Sentinel. How do you measure success in terms of audiences, readership, page views?
We tell this joke all the time because Gannett now is USA Today Co. But so yes, we are a for-profit company, and our team is grant funded. And so there are some overall ways in which Big USA Today Co. likes to measure success, and our team measures success slightly differently because we're this pocket in the newsroom that came to be differently than the rest of the folks there. I say that to say, we look at page views, we look at some of those traditional metrics, but I think a lot of the cool part about producing super hyper local stories on a site that has 1 million views a day is that people are seeing the stories and they're not always from the neighborhoods that we maybe wrote them from. So we find part of the reason we do the engagement pieces that I mentioned is to create space for additional metrics that can tell us if we are building trust. So with the newsletter I mentioned to you, we put multiple stories, 2 to 3 stories from the reporter who reports on Metcalf Park in that newsletter, and it gets texted out to all of the residents who live in Metcalf Park who are signed up through Community Bridges, which is the organization that we're partnering with on that project. So for something like that, I can tell you that it was texted out to about 800 to 900 people, and we're getting about 400 opens, and so that's how we can start to measure. And so for each neighborhood, we're looking for new projects and new opportunities to get a sense of how interested are people in doing this. On the south side, we could tell you that we are getting X number of page views per story, and a lot of times those stories are interesting to people across the city. But we can also tell you if we host an event or having a listening session, we're getting an average of 25 to 30 people per event, which is quite nice for us to be a brand new project who's still trying to, explain to people what we are and why we exist. So those are it's just a couple examples of how we're starting to understand whether or not we're connecting with people in the spaces we say we want to be connecting with folks. Social media is also a good space for that, but since our social media doesn't exist for just Neighborhood Dispatch, it is for the JS writ large, we kind of have to go off of individual posts. I make each one of my reporters post their stories on like a handful of like Facebook groups. They hate it. They're just like, no, do I have to? And I'm like, yes, please. But we're starting to notice, like I was looking through them the other day, and it's like, okay, in certain groups in Harambe, there's a consistent cadence of comments in Harambe and near River West, where people are engaging on Facebook. So those are some of the quirky ways that we're starting to get a sense of if we're connecting with the folks we were set out to connect with.
I think you have to ask that question, what is the impact that you're trying to make?
Right.
Before NNS, I was managing editor at USA Today. I can guarantee 1 million views if I just put a cat video on usatoday.com. That's not going to work at NNS. Well, maybe it will. Neighborhood Cats. Maybe we should start something.
An idea is born right here in the studio.
There's a site called Cats of Madison, and it does get a lot of traction.
But that's not our mission, right? So we kind of keep that North Star. It's like, how do we serve our audience? And looking at it that way, like the engagement, the impact, we follow up. So anytime someone writes a story, they're talking to all the sources, and they give them a feedback sheet, like what happened since then? was there any legislation? We're just, not our bread and butter. Did anything happen? So we get things like, oh, before NNS wrote about us, no one talked to us. But now I have 5 interviews because the story ran at NNS and other media had picked it up. Yeah. So looking at, for us, it's the small victories as opposed to the big numbers. We don't count numbers, we count people.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be right back with more of our conversation with Canella Phillips of the Journal Sentinel and Ron Smith from the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service.
Connections, the Media Edition, is a joint production of the Milwaukee Press Club and the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, 2 organizations that have been part of our city for more than a century. As the oldest continuously operating press club in North America, the Milwaukee Press Club has been a champion for advancing the profession of journalism and supporting the next generation of journalists through scholarships. Milwaukee Rotary Club is one of the largest in the country, with a history of building a stronger community at home and serving others throughout the world. Both organizations have a shared goal of promoting truth and fairness in our public discourse.
Welcome back to our program. I'm Tom Lujak, along with Meredith Meyer, with Canella Phillips and Ron Smith. We have more to ask both of them about their work with the Journal Sentinel and the Neighborhood News Service, but first we want to get personal for a few minutes.
Yeah, we wanted to know more about your backstories and how you got to your current positions in community-focused news and solutions journalism. So, Canella, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got here? What's your backstory?
Oh, gee, me first. Okay. So I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin. I went to university there, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I studied journalism. And at the time, I had some great professors, many of which were really big on community engaged journalism. Sue Robinson comes to mind, and some of the classes even focused on like how to collaborate with community members. So that was something I learned pretty early on. And I remember I had a few internships where I would try and explain what I wanted to do. I'm like, I want to do journalism, but I also wanted to be like community focused. And they were like, oh, okay, so you want to report on a specific space? And I was like, that's not quite getting at it. And Sue, she introduced me to a program at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, and it was an engagement journalism program. So we learned a lot about social media and audience and metrics, but we also were kind of forced to do a larger project where we collaborated with community members and really understanding how to produce participatory media and like how to connect with folks in new ways as journalists and how to address information gaps in our various communities. So, that's my educational background, and that kind of just set the tone for my career. After that, I ended up moving to Kansas City, where I worked for the Kansas City Star doing service journalism, and then I moved over to public media. I was at Kansas City PBS, and there I did communications, but I also ran their monthly magazine and their events program. And so that taught me a lot about the logistics of like how to piece programs together, like how to connect with folks, how to also like do the back end of like how do you, put on an event and how do you make sure that event is successful and all sorts of things. But I had always wanted to move back to Milwaukee. I had applied to a lot of jobs in Milwaukee before I left. And so when this opportunity came up, I pitched myself and I pitched my background as someone who studied this work very deeply, but also had spent some time, like I said, kind of building different programs out, both at the Star as a reporter, some community engaged programs, but also kind of more full-fledged when I was in public media, which was fun. That's my background.
Ron, how about you?
I was a nosy child and always asked inappropriate questions like, why does Aunt Henrietta have a mustache? So my mom would tell me, either you're going to work for the FBI or you're going to be a journalist. I was out of shape, so I was never going to be the FBI. So I ended up starting off at a citywide teen publication written by for Chicago teens called New Expression, and that gave me my start in journalism. It actually was a nonprofit. Who knew? And then worked at a Black weekly in Los Angeles, and then I edited a chain of weeklies, and then ended up at Newsday, the LA Times, the Oregonian, and then came to Milwaukee to work at the Journal Sentinel. And I left there as deputy managing editor, and I ran JS Online and print and I went to be managing editor of USA Today. So I worked at places big and small, but what I've learned is that it was not the circulation of a newspaper or news organization, but how you circulate within that organization. And I wanted to be at a place where I could be a big fish in a small pond and be able to make a difference that way.
I'm curious whether the two of you, I mean, you're getting along great here in the studio. I love the chemistry. Do you see each other, because you're working for different organizations, as competitors?
So that's a good question. And no. And here's why. Not because of when Neighborhood Dispatch started, people were like, oh my God, that's horrible. What? And I said, you know what? These neighbors are never going to be overcovered. And as far as how NNS was going to treat Neighborhood Dispatch, we would treat them with love and respect because we value good journalism. We don't have time to have fiefdoms anymore. Milwaukee is not a news desert. It has news deficits, though, and we need to improve that. So we see them as, I told the staff, nothing changes. But if Neighborhood Dispatch owns something, you know what we're going to do? We're going to move to something else because there's not enough, there's too much to cover. Yeah. But we are too busy. We're like the city of Atlanta. We're too busy to hate.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Kanala?
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think we're competitors in that way. I think that we're doing similar work. And like Ron said, I think Ron explains it perfectly, that there's nothing but good things can come from keeping folks as informed as possible. Even if we do cover the same thing, communities deserve to be able to read about their stories multiple times, even from multiple trained journalists. You know what I mean? Like, that's a benefit. And I was lucky enough that Ron was willing to get coffee with me and, talk to me. And I told him, I said, what are they saying about me behind my back? But no, yes, it's been fantastic. And I don't know, I generally, personally, I feel like I'm big on giving credit to where credit is due. So at any opportunity I get to learn from Ron, but also to give credit to Neighborhood News Service and what they have accomplished in their 15 years and going forward, that is what I will do.
So if you're not competing, and great answers, do you see a future where there might be collaboration? Do you ever see yourselves working together?
We see it in real time. She's talking about one portion of the newsroom. The Journal Sentinel and NNS and Wisconsin Watch have always had a respectful relationship. In fact, it was 2 years ago that we worked on a joint project together looking at housing conditions, out-of-state investors who were coming in and creating havoc in our neighborhoods. And I got a call from Jim Nelson, the business editor, who said, oh my God, we didn't know you had applied for that grant. I said, we didn't. What are you talking about? And so what happened was there was a person, the Journal Sentinel had applied for a grant from Pointer. The person who was on a Pointer board that chose the Journal Sentinel said, oh no, you guys got to do this with NNS because we're not going to give you money without giving NNS money. So we figured out a way to work together. And so Princess, our housing reporter, worked with the investigations team, Carrie Spivak, and we learned a lot from each other in terms of the data reporting. But Princess had the neighbors, and the Journal Sentinel didn't have that, right? So Princess was able to get the neighbors to talk. We ran their stories, and they ran our stories, and it was exposed to multiple audiences, and it actually won the Loeb Award, which is the Business Pulitzer. And that was something that I would have never thought about entering. But Greg Borowski, the executive editor, and a dear friend of mine, Greg and I went to college together. He was 20 years ahead of me. Not really, but that's the story I tell. He and I have been friends since the fall of 1985. And I have no doubt about his commitment to quality journalism. We don't have time or space with fewer journalists to have this attitude of fiefdoms. Like, we have to pick our spots. We can't maybe have 8 people at a school board meeting anymore. We can't. Right. So it might be, hey, are you guys going to be at SDC? Because we're going here. And we talk about it. And maybe that wasn't something we did 5 years ago, but we have to do it now so that we can choose our space and how we serve our readers in a smart way so that it gets covered. At the end of the day, we're all committed to making Milwaukee the most informed city in the world.
So you have 15 years under your belt, or NNS does. It's been around for 15 years, as you've said. What do the next 5 years look like for NNS? What do you envision? So
I tell the staff that NNS, we want to be a daily destination for crucial information that provides inspiration. And so my dad was a Baptist minister, so everything has to have a rhyme to it. But really, so NNS has done a great job of covering the community and listening to community voices. And now, because we have full-time staff, I want them to be in the corridors of power, the city council, the county board of supervisors, before something happens, so that we can tell our readers what's going on and they can make a difference instead of this happened. Now the script needs to be flipped to this is happening and you can stop it or you can support it. So we want to be more public service journalism, more accountability, but our bread and butter is still going to be those NNS spotlights, those ordinary people who do extraordinary things, the service journalism, the community engagement. It's really important that we continue not only to build trust, but to cultivate trust. So we call it NNS Connects, and sometimes it's NNS Reconnects, that there's some people we haven't talked to in 10 years that we need to go back to and say, hey, we're still here, and really form these partnerships. And we're trying to bring in a program called Documenters, yes, that trains residents to cover meetings and shares it with the whole media ecosystem. So they might go to a board of supervisors meeting, and there's AI that can do some of this stuff, but they can't go have a Wanda Booker, who's a former staff member's mom, say, hey, this is what happened at MPS. Coming from her, it's going to be credible. So figuring out ways to give that power to residents. We often hear that information's power, but for a long time, power's only belonged to certain people. We want it to belong to all the people.
So, Canela, how about you? You're the new kid on the block, so to speak. 5 years from now, what will the Journal Sentinel's neighborhood dispatch team be doing?
Yeah, no, I love the Documenters program. I'll just say that real quick because it also pays those folks to go out there and do that, which is huge.
Yep.
But yeah, so we're the new kids on the block, and one of my reporters, her name's April. She will hate this because we use this all the time. But when I first started, I started working on a kind of a training for us to sit with some engagement journalists who work elsewhere in the country and have found success to go over what we want to do and really talk through how to make that possible. So we had this training. It was a day-long boot camp, and at the beginning of the training, April says, hey, or I asked everyone, what do you want your goal to be, in this work? And she says, well, I really I want to be able to go around the neighborhood and everybody knows my name. Like, that's my goal. And it's like 8 a.m. We're like, oh yeah, that's a great
like
goal.
Cheers.
Yeah, we're like, great. And then afterwards, I had them all kind of like do some storyboarding on some things that we wanted to accomplish, and we had it planned where we were going to ask them to revisit their goals and tell us if anything changed. And she says, after I've been thinking about this, I actually think instead of everyone knowing my name, I want to know everybody's name in the neighborhood. And so I think that's the goal for the neighborhood dispatch. We may not, we might be the new kids on the block. We have a lot of veteran reporters around us who are still teaching us ways to do things. There are fantastic journalism outfits in this city who are doing amazing work. And so I think a really humble thing for me to ask of my team and for me to ask myself is that if we're going to say we're going to do the work, we're going to do it the best we can. But more importantly, we're going to get to the point where we know everybody, where we can show up. And maybe you don't want to talk to us. Maybe you don't like the Journal Sentinel. Maybe you only want to talk to NNS, and that's okay. But at least we know your name. At least we know you live in that house and you've been having those issues, and we're going to look into it anyway. You know what I mean? We're going to ask someone else to talk to us, but we're going to get into it. We want to be useful, and we want to be good community members, and that's what good community members do.
Wow, yeah. So the journey to becoming household names for both of you, I hear.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, thank you, Ron and Canela. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and also for the really important work you're doing covering communities, covering neighborhoods. So we wish you and your organizations all the best.
And we thank all of our listeners for spending some time to hear your stories. So interesting to know that you're out there doing great work. This is a joint production, of course, by the Milwaukee Press Club and the Rotary Club of Milwaukee.
If you would like to learn more about the work both of our clubs are doing, you should definitely visit our websites, milwaukeepressclub.org and milwaukeerotary.com.
And we'll be back with another edition of Connections, the media edition, soon. Until then, I'm Tom Lujack from Milwaukee Rotary.
And I'm Meredith Meyer with the Milwaukee Press Club. Wishing you all a great day. that.
Our maiden voyage. We're the new kids on the block, not you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Connections, the Media Edition, is a production of the Rotary Club of Milwaukee and the Milwaukee Press Club. Our hosts are Tom Lujak and Meredith Meyer. The executive producers are Dave Murphy and Scotty Myers. Aaron Hoven is in charge of streaming and promotion. And our technical director is Don Hertz at the Dietrich College of Communications at Marquette University, where we record the program. To learn more about Rotary and the way it serves people in Milwaukee and around the world, go to MilwaukeeRotary.com. And to join the Milwaukee Press Club or attend one of its many events, visit MilwaukeePressClub.org.